How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 3.
Greetings, welcome. The third hour is here. Comes faster than you can imagine. It's the Eric Erickson Show, and the phone number is 877-973-7425, and text Eric, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777 to get the show notes and all. Azerbaijan has been attacked by Iran. It's another growing list of mostly Muslim nations attacked. Azerbaijan has denounced the attack. Quote, this morning, the Iranian deputy foreign minister called asking for Azerbaijan's help to evacuate the remaining staff from their embassy in Lebanon because they could not do it themselves. I immediately ordered assistance and a plane to be sent. They even offered to pay, but I said it was not necessary. And in return, we get an attack in Nakhchivan carried out in such a dirty, cowardly, and unmanned way. The stain will never be erased from their faces. Essentially, there is an oil pipeline that runs around that part of the world and connects into Israel, giving Israel access to oil, and the Iranians tried to blow it up. The Israelis actually have relations with Azerbaijan as well. And so it's just very interesting to watch. Azerbaijan gets asked by Iran to help evacuate personnel. They say, gladly, don't worry about it. We'll cover the cost. And then Iran attacks them. Just remarkable stuff from the Iranians. Now, while all of that is happening, and we have the Hate America First crowd in this country, we still have a government shutdown happening right now with the Department of Homeland Security. The Democrats have shut it down. So don't take this as bragging. I'm telling you about my life. It's not really a brag. I got to pay for it through the nose. I don't travel through the Atlanta airport anymore. I don't have the money to fly private. So I travel on Delta, but I go through a private terminal now when I'm in the Atlanta airport for a couple of reasons, most of which are I have been yelled at, berated while standing at a urinal in the airport on more than one occasion. But it really came to a head after the 2024 election when a man just lost his mind as I was in the bathroom, followed me in while I was using the bathroom, and then had a guy follow me to my car after I was getting my bag. And now the first guy was angry. The second guy was very, very kind, but he followed me like I got my bag from baggage claim after I came back from a trip to Tulsa right after the 2024 election. He followed me all the way to my car in the parking garage and then realized he hadn't even gotten his luggage and had to go back. And my team was on, this is all before the Charlie Kirk stuff. They're like, you can't, and I'm like, listen, you can't afford to pay for me to fly private, and I travel a lot. Like, I'm in a hotel room right now doing the show in D.C. So the accommodation was paying for this. There's a private terminal near the Atlanta airport. It is very pricey, but it's less than flying private, which I can't afford to do. And they have a TSA terminal inside the building, so the people who use it go. But because the government is shut down, the way it works now is they have to drive you. You'd go through TSA and they drive you across the tarmac at the airport, take you to the side of the plane, and you go up the steps on the outside of the plane before anybody boards. The procedure with the government being shut down is they can't have the TSA personnel there because there aren't enough. So many of them call in sick because they're not getting paid and they're required to do their job. And so they take you to the main entrance of the airport, and then you go through a special gate that's reserved for pilots and employees and stuff like that, so you still get through quicker. And then they take you down to a car and drive you to the side of the plane, and you get on the plane. It is pampering. It is very spoiled to do. But when I'm in other airports, I still go through those airports. It's just the Atlanta airport now. There have been several incidents. Those aren't the only two. Those are the most recent ones before I started doing this, where it was increasingly apparent that I needed to find a way, if I couldn't fly private, to be able to fly in ways. I mean, we have people who drive past our house to see if I live. We've had people show up at our house in the middle of the night. And at some point, the next step for me is to buy land and build a house, or at least move into a gated neighborhood. But it's all well and good. I am very blessed to live the life that I live, to do what I do for a living. But there are consequences to it, for both me and for my family as well. And a lot of it has to do with safety. People have lost their mind these days. All of this is, though, a roundabout way of saying that so the government shut down. You would never know it in your daily life that the government is shut down. In fact, if you go through a lot of major airports right now, like after I do the show, I got to run off to the airport and fly home, and there is a backlog in the D.C. airports, in Dulles and Reagan and Baltimore, because TSA agents aren't showing up because they're not getting paid. They are without a paycheck now. And you wouldn't know it unless you travel regularly and experience it, that the Department of Homeland Security is shut down. The employees of the Department of Homeland Security are still required to go to work, but it's still shut down. James Langford, the senator from Oklahoma, was on with Maria Bartiromo. I want to play you this exchange.
Well, Senator, what about that? I mean, you're on the Homeland Security Committee. Should we be worried that we're going to see sleeper cells get activated and a potential terrorism issue here at home?
Maria, that's a bell I've been ringing for years now. You go back 3 years ago, I was talking to the Biden administration saying you are allowing in what they call special interest aliens. These are folks that we don't have any information on them. They come from known areas of terrorism like Iran, that they were allowing to come across the border with no ID, no background check, and they were releasing them in the country. They had 70,000 in 1 year that they allowed in. I continue to be able to hammer away on this to say we've got to identify who all those people are. It is very important that ICE is in the field actually finding those individuals the Biden administration allowed in, including Iranians, that we have no background information on that came illegally into our country.
Yeah.
And yet the government is shut down. The Department of Homeland Security is shut down, and people are required to show up. They're required to engage. But I'm just flummoxed that no one thinks this is as big a deal as I think it is. The fact that the Department of Homeland Security is shut down and employees have to go to work without pay. And whether you want to call it a war or not, a limited security operation, whatever you want to call it, we're at war in Iran right now, dropping a lot of bombs, and they potentially have sleeper cells in the United States who came across the border during the Biden administration and have been hiding here. And I guess I talked to somebody last night here in D.C. who said perhaps the proof that this hasn't happened is that nothing has happened. And I'm like, perhaps. I hope that's the case. I hope so. It's just it's intriguing to me, though, that the Democrats, I almost kind of wonder if they're hoping for some level of domestic terrorism from this to blame Donald Trump. Because you know and I know that if something happens, they are, in fact, going to blame the United States, that they are, in fact, going to say that this is Donald Trump's fault. They are going to say, quote unquote, blood is on Donald Trump's hands. You mark my words. If something bad happens in this country, they will say there is blood on Donald Trump's hands. Charlie, maybe you want to just save this clip. For God forbid something like that does happen. They're going to say it, that blood is on Donald Trump's hands. Meanwhile, they're the ones who are refusing to open the Department of Homeland Security. And it's not just the TSA, although TSA is kind of a big one. But FEMA is unfunded. The Coast Guard is unfunded right now. They're expected to show up. They're expected to work, but they're not getting a paycheck because Homeland Security is shut down. And I just don't understand why the Republicans themselves aren't making this a giant issue right now. They're trying to force votes on the Democrats, but they're not out there chomping at the bit on this, that Homeland Security is shut down. And so that leads me to something else. Is the Department of Homeland Security as presently structured necessary? If you were to go back in the Wayback Machine after 9/11 and the congressional consideration of the Department of Homeland Security. I was only starting out at the time as a blogger, writing letters to the editor and things like that. And I was at the time skeptical that we needed this massive bureaucracy. And I have maintained my skepticism over time that is the Department of Homeland Security as structured necessary? Now, if you will recall, the reason Homeland Security was structured the way it was structured was because after 9/11, there was so much miscommunication between intelligence agencies, the FBI, and other entities. It was decided that we needed this new Department of Homeland Security that could contain within one cabinet department all of these threats. It would increase coordination. There'd be one secretary, so chains of command would flow through one person, and that person right now is pretty much an idiot. I don't even know if y'all have seen Kristi Noem's interrogation before the United States Senate, but it was awful for her. It did not go well. The Republicans, John Kennedy of Louisiana, eviscerated the woman, among others. It didn't go well. She didn't come off bright. She didn't come off competent or credible, and she's in charge of it. As I was telling a group of people this morning at a meeting that, when actors are very famously stupid people. Anthony Hopkins said that I have no opinions on anything because actors are stupid. That's Anthony Hopkins' words, Sir Anthony Hopkins. And when you get your cabinet from central casting because they look like they play the role, they could be stupid people. And Kristi Noem, not exactly bringing the best here. She had a horrible performance of the Capitol, but still, at least she's in charge of Homeland Security, and this is an organization that has been defunded by the Democrats. It's not open. We're at war with a rogue terrorist regime that has probably sent people into this country, that plotted the assassination of the current sitting president of the United States on more than one occasion. And the Democrats do not think that they should fund the Department of Homeland Security unless they get a compromise on immigration. But the immigration aspect is fully funded. ICE and Border Patrol are fully funded through 2028. It's TSA and FEMA and the Coast Guard that are not funded. And the Democrats have no desire to open it, and the Republicans are not calling them to account. I'm like, the Democrats are playing up the politics of the attack on Iraq. I'm not sure why we have not embraced the politics on our side to make a big deal out of this. I'm just baffled by the way we have not actually engaged in making the Democrats own the shutdown of Homeland Security, because and I know if something bad happens, they're going to blame it on Trump. But if you can preset the narrative that the Democrats have shut down Homeland Security before, God forbid, something happens, it's going to make it harder for the Democrats to be able to put this all on Donald Trump and blame him. The politics of this are just a big red flag for me. Republicans, you need to be out there beating the drum that the Democrats have shut down Homeland Security at a time of war. The problem for the Republicans is the president has kind of boxed them in on this, that they don't want to say they're at war, because then that raises the question of a declaration of war. But we have a hostile engagement of Iran. You can say that. We have engaged the Iranians. Why haven't the Democrats reopened the Department of Homeland Security? Americans are less safe at this moment, not just because of an engagement with Iran, but because the Democrats refuse to fund the entity created after 9/11 to help keep Americans safe. There are ways to message this, Republicans, and it behooves you to do it now before, again, God forbid, something bad happens. Folks, okay, so this is somewhat awkward. I got kicked out of my hotel room. I was over time. I knew I was going to pre-record the last hour of the show, and now there's the breaking news about Kristi Noem, and I feel like I need to come on here and chat with you about it. So I did my prior monologue on the government shutdown, and now suddenly we have the Kristi Noem news. So I'm literally sitting in an airport in a lounge with a remote microphone I have for emergencies, re-recording a segment of my show so that I can get you guys this up-to-date information. So Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem has been fired by the president. He is very upset because she said the president approved a $200+ million grant that the president had no knowledge of, and it was a non-competitive grant that allegedly was given to the husband of Tricia McLaughlin, who left the Department of Homeland Security last week. So the president started calling around the Capitol Hill after a Reuters reporter called him asking whether or not he should keep Kristi Noem. And members of the House and the Senate began to express to the president their deep frustration with Kristi Noem, particularly after her handling of the issue with Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana, which I mentioned earlier in the program, his evisceration of her the other day. So the president has now fired Kristi Noem and is going to replace her with Markwayne Mullin of Oklahoma. Now, Markwayne Mullin will have to go through Senate confirmation. He technically cannot jump directly into the role because he's never been approved for a cabinet or sub-cabinet position before by the Senate. But the Senate Republicans and the Senate Democrats all really like Markwayne Mullin and are willing to give this to him. Now, behind the scenes on Capitol Hill, there are some Republicans that I've been trading text messages with who are frustrated over this because they think Markwayne Mullin is a very safe Senate seat. They don't want a special election surprise in Oklahoma, but given the Republican nature of Oklahoma, more likely than not, Markwayne Mullin is going to be able to pull it out as Secretary of Homeland Security, and then also get a Republican put into the Senate. Now, concurrently, you got to remember that, you can probably hear I'm in the airport and have their background noise. You got to remember that the governor of Oklahoma will be able to put someone into the slot for Markwayne Mullin and give that person some level of incumbency. So you got Kristi Noem is out. That probably means Corey Lewandowski is out. My understanding is Markwayne Mullin is not a fan of Corey Lewandowski either. The Republicans in the Senate are breathing a sigh of relief that they're not going to have to deal with Kristi Noem on the campaign trail come November. They're deeply, deeply frustrated with Noem. So this is a big win. The president gets a reboot, as I've been saying, gets to reboot Homeland Security. Tom Homan gets more power to handle this. Markwayne Mullin is a straight shooter, a fantastic guy. He'll be a great Secretary of Homeland Security. And now the president can move on to other things. As I'm sitting here, I just actually got a text message from one of the ranking members of the Senate telling me that they think Markwayne Mullin will be a shoo-in and that a number of Republicans in the Congress actually recommended him to the president, who was already thinking of that. It came up apparently in this conversation. I'm reading a text. Sorry, this is all happening on the fly. Reading a text from a member of Congress that from the Senate that Markwayne Mullin was someone a couple people had recommended to the president. The president likes him. They've got a brilliant relationship. He's kind of been the Trump whisperer in the Senate. They're kind of sad to lose him in that regard, but also they think that he will be a fantastic Homeland Security Secretary who will be easily confirmable, although the Democrats will, of course, make some level of show about it. Now, let me tell you about Swiss America. Still got to do the live reads. I'm live in Dulles Airport right now with you guys. This microphone is fantastic. Swiss America wants to help you with your retirement and finances. What you can do is you can go to SwissAmerica.com/Eric, SwissAmerica.com/ERICK, and Swiss America can give you everything you need to be up to date with the gold prices. I didn't even talk about the story about Venezuela sending gold to the United States. They make it easy for you to get into gold and silver investing. They also want to give you the report, The Secret War on Cash. You go to SwissAmerica.com/Eric. That's SwissAmerica.com/ERICK. And Swiss America will be able to get you up to speed. They'll be able to help you with your retirement and finances. They can get you that free report. Go to SwissAmerica.com/ERICK. SwissAmerica.com/ERICK. Let Swiss America help you with your retirement and finances and educate you. And it's Eric Erickson, live from Dulles. We'll be right back. You know, we're going to have a very interesting open line Friday, I suspect, tomorrow. 877-973-7425. Might as well save your phone calls now, and I will take your calls tomorrow. A lot of questions about what's going on. And one thing you need to note, CNN has a report that the Iranians, instead of firing missiles at Qatar, sent 2 Russian bombers, flying them 80 feet above the Persian Gulf. Only 80 feet. Flying them at high speed above the Persian Gulf. They were detected 2 minutes out. They flew 80 feet above the Persian Gulf to avoid radar detection. They got within 2 minutes of a major American military base in Qatar, and the Qataris scrambled F-15s and shot them down. Meanwhile, an American F-15 blew up over Iran. The pilot ejected. We're not sure why. It doesn't appear to be that the Iranians shot him down, though the Iranians are claiming that now it appears to be some failure with the aircraft. And the pilot was rescued by the IDF and American Joint Task Force, got out of Iran. This is the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, earlier. And by the way, I got some angry person yesterday who told me I need to start saying the Department of War because that's what it's called. And it's not. and I believe in truth. I believe in facts. The United States Congress named this department the Department of Defense, and the United States Congress has not changed the name. And because the United States Congress is the one that designated it by law and did not change the name, I'm not going to say the Department of War. I know the Trump administration calls it the Department of War. They've changed the signage and the banners and the title for the Secretary of Defense, but it's the Defense Department until Congress changes it. I respect the rule of law in this country, so I'm not going to change for propagandistic purposes, calling it from the Department of Defense, Department of War. This is the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth.
Well, President Trump recognizes the wisdom of the Monroe Doctrine, and the days of us betraying and endangering our own citizens are finished. President Trump has reestablished the Monroe Doctrine, the Trump corollary of the Monroe Doctrine, or if you'd like, for short, you can just call it the Donroe Doctrine. Under President Trump, securing America's interest in the Western Hemisphere and keeping our homeland safe are our top national security priorities. The President's historic national defense strategy ensures that the Department of War will prioritize resources around the threats and objectives that are core to homeland defense and the people and prosperity of the American people. And to start, the Department of War is once again defending our borders as a priority of our national defense. With our law enforcement partners, we are defending our borders and making our streets safe again. Crossings at our southern border, at the U.S.-Mexico border, have dropped to the lowest number in history. Murders nationwide have plummeted by more than 20%. We now have operational control of our southern border. 0 people are crossing our southern border. We will not rest until we have complete operational control of every inch of all of our borders. So it starts with us. We're addressing it.
And yet the Democrats keep Homeland Security closed down. At least the Department of Defense is up and operational. You know, if the Democrats got wind of what the president intended to do in Iran, they probably would have defunded the Department of Defense as well. It's just kind of wild to see the Democrats out there like this in just refusing to engage in any sort of way. Meanwhile, you've got members of the press who are still outraged they're being excluded from the Pentagon. Now, you know, it's not just left-wing reporters. There actually are a number of conservative reporters at the Wall Street Journal who have refused to go along with the Pentagon's insistence that stories be pre-cleared by the Pentagon. That was one of the rules Pete Hegseth wanted, is they couldn't roam the halls as they had in the past, which is understandable, but also they had to pre-clear reports from the Department of Defense before running those reports. Fox News has decided they wouldn't participate. Newsmax has decided they wouldn't participate. But what's notable is that The Atlantic is running a story today claiming that when Pete Hegseth made some comment about the 6 dead American soldiers, that there were gasps and silence in the room, that it went over so poorly with the press of the room, and yet multiple people who were in the room, who are reporters for the Daily Wire, the Federalist, and elsewhere, said this did not happen. We were in the room and it did not happen. It is actually interesting to watch people like Brian Stelter and others at CNN attacking the reporters who are in the Pentagon who did sign the pledge, claiming that somehow they're not legitimate reporters when a lot of them are the ones breaking news now because the outside entities can't. Except the outside entities, the New York Times, Fox News, and others continue to have well-sourced stories inside the Pentagon, and the media just doesn't like it. But. The New York Times today is running a piece. Let me read you this piece. Of course, Trump bombed Iran. President Trump's attack on Iran is astonishing in its audacity, aggression, and lawlessness. Mr. Trump ordered strikes in the midst of negotiations with a nation that posed no remotely imminent threat to the United States. He did nothing to prepare his country for war. Now he's offering a dizzying array of rationales and objectives caught in a maelstrom of his own making. Beyond breaking with precedent, Mr. Trump also broke with himself. In 3 straight presidential campaigns, he criticized American military adventures in the Middle East, relying on the stance to distinguish his America First mantra from rival Republicans and Democrats alike. I'm not going to start wars, he vowed on election night 2024. I'm going to stop wars. Yet for all its Trumpian characteristics, this war is the logical conclusion of how the United States has long dealt with Iran. For decades, presidents have depicted the Islamic Republic not just as a pernicious presence in the Middle East, but also as an intolerable danger to the United States that no diplomatic deal could redress. When politicians inflate a threat and stigmatize peaceful means of handling it, an enterprising leader will one day reach for a radical solution. Now, it goes on and on and on and on, and here are the authors. Stephen Wertheim is a senior fellow in American Statecraft Program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace and a visiting lecturer at Yale Law School. Robert Malley is a lecturer at Yale Jackson School and the author with Hussein Agha of Tomorrow is Yesterday, Life, Death, and the Pursuit of Peace in Israel-Palestine. He served as U.S. Special Envoy for Iran from January 2021 to April 2023 and a lead negotiator of the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. Do you know what the New York Times does not say? Robert Malley is under FBI investigation, and he lost his security clearance for leaking classified information to Iran. Robert Malley was taken off the negotiating team of the Biden administration when the FBI became convinced that he was leaking information to Iran. He's been under investigation for that. The New York Times doesn't mention any of that. Robert Malley was widely considered inside the Biden administration to be an apologist for Iran, whether he was on their payroll or not. Many of the people within the Biden administration questioned his loyalty. Rightly or wrongly, they did. The New York Times doesn't bring any of that up. And here comes this guy who is being investigated for possibly leaking classified information to the Iranians, who writes a piece that is pro-Iran. And the New York Times doesn't disclose that. It's just wild to me that the New York Times, and by the way, Nicholas Kristof of the New York Times echoing this, quoting this, if the United States wants to stop plunging into Middle Eastern wars, it needs to value its own interests more than it hates its old enemies, that refuses to even acknowledge who Robert Malley is, why he's suspect on this. The media in this country just simply doesn't want to be honest. The media in this country just simply does not want to recognize that there are serious problems. I mean, Barack Obama fired the guy for hanging out with Hamas, and his father was a sidekick to Yasser Arafat. And nobody in the press wants to disclose this stuff. Kudos to CNN for having a reporter with connections inside Iran, noting how the Iranian people are willing to die to be free of a repressive regime that they compare to a concentration camp. Kudos to CNN for doing that. But notice how the New York Times won't do that. Notice how so much of the American press gets its news shaped by the New York Times, who elevates these sorts of voices and does not disclose the truth about these individuals. Now, I realize I'm somewhat of a broken record with you guys when it comes to this, and that I'm preaching to the choir on this. But when this sort of thing happens, I think it's very, very important to call it out and note it, to raise the red flag on it because of the pernicious effect it has in shaping the minds of other people in the world today. It's like, for example, my wife the other day was asking me about what happened in Iran in 1953 because she was listening to a podcaster who's a Christian influencer that my wife likes, we'll go nameless, who clearly didn't know the facts. That in 1953, there was a coup to replace the Shah of Iran, backed by the Soviets, and the British and the Americans restored the Shah to power and pushed out the unelected prime minister. They claim it was an overthrow of a democratic regime. There was no democratic regime in Iran, and the prime minister, who was not democratically elected, was backed by the Soviets, and the Americans and the British responded and restored the Shah to power. And people are like, oh, 1953, it's all about the oil. It's all about this. No, it's actually far more complicated than that. In a Cold War power struggle with the Soviets, where ultimately the Soviets allied with the Ayatollah and replaced the Shah's regime in 1979. And then the Ayatollah began killing all the people who were tied to the Soviets. And people don't understand that history. It's deeply, deeply troubling to me how at a time of war, you have people now on the left and the right, by the way. It's not just the left. It is people on the right as well who are rooting against American troops, who are rooting against the president of the United States, who hope that the president gets a black eye in Iran so that they can redefine a narrative against the president. They can exploit it for isolationist means. They can exploit it for their own agenda. It bothers me deeply to see people so willing to root against the United States in war. And by the way, before you come at me, I disagreed with what Barack Obama did with our military engagement in Libya, but I rooted for American success. I actually thought that Barack Obama, when he drew red lines in Syria, should have enforced the red lines, and he didn't. And the situation escalated out of control there. I actually do believe that we should support the American military when the American military engages. I believe that we absolutely should support American soldiers in harm's way. And what is notable is so much of the American press corps still believes themselves not really loyal to the United States, but above the United States. They're citizens of the world, and they should cover it very fairly, not from the American perspective. Maybe they should cover it from the Chinese perspective. I just simply think that's wrong. And by the way, there is some good reporting out there. Let me read you this from Mike Allen in Axios. Last Monday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called President Trump with a stunning tip. Iran's supreme leader and his top advisors were set to meet at a single location in Tehran Saturday morning. They could all be killed in one devastating airstrike, Netanyahu told Trump and his team. Axios' Mark Caputo and Barak Avid write, why it matters. The February 23rd call held from the White House Situation Room and previously unreported was a pivotal moment. It answers the question that lawmakers, MAGA skeptics, and world leaders have been asking since Saturday, why now? The answer, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and his inner circle were irresistible targets of opportunity that neither Trump nor Netanyahu wanted to pass up. Trump was already leaning towards striking Iran before learning the new intelligence about Khamenei. What he hadn't decided was when until Netanyahu called. The call was part of months of intensive coordination between the two leaders who met twice and spoke by phone 15 times in the 2 months leading to the war, according to the U.S. and Israeli officials. The U.S. and Iran had considered striking a week earlier, but postponed for intelligence and operational reasons, including bad weather. Inside the room, an initial CIA check conducted at Trump's direction confirmed the Israeli intelligence. Preparations accelerated as Trump told Netanyahu he would consider moving forward, but first came the President's State of the Union the following night. The same day, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff called from Geneva after hours of talks with Iranian officials and delivered a blunt verdict. Negotiations were going nowhere. Trump was now convinced the intelligence was solid, diplomacy was dead, it was time to strike. The original plan was to strike in late March or April, giving Trump and Netanyahu time to shore up the public. But given the opportunities, it came, and he took the opportunity, and we're all better off because he did. And we should be cheering on the success of American soldiers, sailors, and airmen right now. Y'all, I got to play you this clip. This is from ABC News, not our ABC News, but from Australia. And this poor reporter is just having a moment.
Don Rothwell is Professor of International Law at ANU with a specific focus on the law of the sea. Don Rothwell, welcome.
Thank you.
So what was your initial reaction to the sinking of the Iranian warship off the coast of Sri Lanka?
Really quite surprised, because this is a significant escalation by the United States in terms of the area of combat operations extending well into the Indian Ocean and quite some considerable distance from where we've seen the conflict really being centred at the moment in the Middle East.
So the US Secretary of Defense and War, Pete Hegseth, in announcing the news of the sinking, said the Iranian warship, quote, thought it was safe in international waters. Should it have been?
Look, I think we need to make it quite clear here that given that we have an armed conflict at the moment between the United States and Iran, any member of the Iranian military is a legitimate combatant. And as a legitimate combatant, they become a legitimate target for the United States in most settings. So the fact that the Iranian warship was, as I said, in the Indian Ocean off the coast of Sri Lanka at some considerable distance from the major area of combat operations really gives it no immunity under those settings.
So it was still breaking international law in taking this action?
No, what I'm saying is that the United States did have a right as a combatant to be able to target the Iranian warship, even though it was in international waters in the Indian Ocean off the Sri Lankan coast. So there's no real issue there in terms of international humanitarian law and the legitimacy of the US targeting of this vessel. But as I'm saying, on the basis of the evidence that I see before it at the moment, there's no real issue about this actual strike on this Iranian naval vessel.
So should we be concerned in Australia that the US-Iranian conflict could come to our waters if indeed an Iranian warship does come close to our shores?
He goes on to say the Americans could do it, and she has a meltdown. Again, international laws for suckers. The international law is just used as a cudgel against the United States. Oh, well, poor Iranians. Now, I got to tell you about Rinnai. My tankless water heater works phenomenally, and it would for you as well. You can yank your tank. Our power bill went down when we did, and our water consumption usage went down as well. We weren't filling up tanks constantly and keeping them hot all the time. It works when your water comes on and you want hot water, and it is there. Ours heats up quick around the house. Go to talkingtankless.com, talkingtankless.com, and you'll see a button where you can talk to a Rinnai professional to put in a tankless water heater at your current house. You can reroute it around. We routed out of our tank of a water heater to our tankless. We never run out of hot water now. You won't either. TalkingTankless.com from Rinnai. You'll want to get their tankless water heater so you never run out of hot water again. TalkingTankless.com. It's a fantastic product. It lowered our power bills. It keeps us with unlimited hot water. TalkingTankless.com. Check out from Rinnai how you too can have hot water forever at TalkingTankless.com.